that we have to put our ideas in the implementation. We are inviting you for the second session, Education and Innovation, and I am calling Dr. Mohamed Al-Muala to chair this session. The name of God, the most gracious and most merciful, peace be upon you. First of all, I will start this second two session. The main speaker are Mahmoud and Massad, was Dr. Stephen Vincent. First of all, I want to thank the Regional Center for Educational Planning and Organizing for the third International Conference on Education and the Future of Planning and Praxis, which is being conducted under the patronage of Zionist Sheikh Sultan bin Mohamed Al-Qasmi, the member of the Supreme Council and ruler of Sharjah. Will focus on the education and innovation, which is very important for the planning of the future of education in the whole world in general, and more importantly here in the Arab and the GCC region. This also subject is very important for the United Arab Emirates, because Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum has initiated, or actually launched, the Prime Minister and ruler of Dubai, the strategy, national strategy of innovation, which will make the UAE the one of the most innovative nation in the world in the coming 7 years, which will focus on 7 national sector in the UAE. The most important, the education sector. The strategy will support the innovation in education through enhancing the skills of the students through the way skills, the ability of coexistence, and the strategy will focus on 4 main lanes. The 4th lane, the input of education, will be trying to enhance the innovation and the skills, and with the focus on science and technology and mathematics, and creating also more subjects for the innovation. And in the same sector, the UAE has announced that 2015, the year of innovation, and through the government summit held in February, Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Presidential Affairs, that he has launched 7 initiative for the innovation in the sector, in the education sector. In this session, we will present 2 papers. The first one is the structure and culture contextualization necessary for the development of creativity and innovation, which will be presented by Mahmoud Al-Massad, who is expert and doctorate in the education and from Ain Shams in Cairo. And he is now working as expert in the in the Regional Center for Educational Planning. Mahmoud Al-Massad, he has a long list of experience and who has worked as a teacher and specialized and head of training and head of education and head of training as well, and head of curriculum and Secretary General of the Ministry of Education. And he has also big experience in he worked as academic manager of the Al Ma'arif with 30,000 students, and which includes all kind of curriculum, international curriculum. He is the author of many books and research in terms of in the fields of education, and who took part also in many international symposiums and summits. I will invite Dr. Mahmoud Massad to present his paper.
In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful, praise be to Allah, praise be to Almighty Allah, and peace be upon Prophet Muhammad. The topic of the research paper I'm going to present is the organizational frameworks for the flourishing of innovation. I will focus in this paper on two key points: the structural and cultural contextualization necessary for the development of creativity and innovation. This does not mean that this is the only concept that has this function. There are many other relevant factors, but this paper will focus mainly on those two factors. At the beginning, it is necessary to take a quick look at the two main concepts of creativity and innovation, especially in light of the interconnectedness and even interchangeability of these two concepts. Sometimes they are used interchangeably, but there is a subtle difference. Despite this interchangeability, there is a difference between those two concepts. If innovation in particular is a mental process for individuals, creativity is also a mental process that starts with a mental process, but at a group level or a corporate level or at the individual level. Both concepts are interchangeably utilized and have intersection, but if we would like to grasp a deeper meaning and a deeper understanding of these concepts, then we need to look at them as intersecting circles and not as a linear process. Innovation and creativity, when we look at them as processes, we look at them as we start with producing ideas, and the conclusion is putting those ideas into action and implementing them. This means turning an idea into a tangible reality, whether we are talking about this reality of implementation, whether it has to do with the procedures or the utilized or implemented steps. In any case, the people cannot acknowledge that an idea is genuinely innovative unless it is implemented. In other words, we usually acknowledge that we seek innovation, but we do not mean stopping at an innovative idea. It's just like in this case we mean creativity, but we mean innovation. If we want innovation or creativity, then we will be talking about innovation as an idea and then turning this idea into a tangible reality. This process that we are talking about can be understood only within the idea of or the concept of idea design or contextualization, which resembles a number of intersecting circles that are dynamically following a circular logic. Sometimes we start with an idea and then we end by implementation, but sometimes even this implementation may also generate another idea. That is why we don't know where the concept started. Yet this idea or the concept of idea design has to go through three interconnected sections or interconnected phases. The first phase is having and invoking an idea that offers a solution and looking at the scenarios of solution and looking into selecting one of them. The second phase is thinking, or having a mental image where we, and at this stage, we start generating ideas. And once an idea is generated, it has to be put into context, it has to be developed until it moves on to the third phase, which is the phase of implementation. In the third phase, we talk about the number of activities through which we can develop our work or select new methods and mechanisms that accelerate production. But if we want to get back to the concept of this interchangeability and interconnectedness, we need to revert this concept or this product and trace it back to its very starting point so it can be redeveloped once more. So we are talking about this process and this circular process. That is why we say we can never miss shedding light on the best opinion that was expressed, but it was expressed also by the Theodore, that what we miss the most in our entities is generation of ideas and implementing them in a tangible manner. And with this conclusion, we will be talking about innovation, we'll be talking about creativity, but we are admitting that the beginning of creativity is the introduction of the innovation process. In order to make our discussion as realistic as possible and highly dependent, we need to, let's move on to the next slide, we need to talk about leadership. And this is one of the most important factors that can be added to the cultural and educational framework or structural frameworks. The concept of generating ideas cannot begin or start properly unless it has innovative leadership that can envisage the future, because we are talking about leadership. We are talking about planning for the future, and you cannot plan for the future without having a highly resourceful leadership, especially in terms of envisioning the future and predicting the changes and pinpointing the opportunities and challenges and threats, and even turning some of these threats into opportunities, and thereby taking the necessary procedures that can materialize or the entity's vision. So we're talking about leadership, planning for the future, and creativity by generating these ideas, and then we move on to innovation by turning them into products. This is the leadership's role that I've been talking about. from start to end. This is the role of leadership, and this is the role that we need the most, and we miss the most as well in many cases in our educational institutes and educational entities. If we look at any organization, whether it is large or small, we are talking about schools and an educational zone, a ministry, or even a country. Moving on to the next slide. This organization that we're talking about, at the beginning we need to talk about leadership. This leadership plays a key role in leading the way, and it must have a clear vision, or shape the vision, or play a key role in shaping it, and then start studying the internal dynamics of the organization, starting from the human capital. Do we have the proper human capital? Are they capable of leading the way to change and innovation? The human capital, the technological capital also, and what is required to develop it, the financial capital as well, and the government subsidies that you need as well. All of these factors should be studied, whether within the organization itself or the other factors that affect it externally. So we need a full study, and only that full study can tell us the facts and the practical ideas, highlight the practical ideas, and look into turning these ideas into implementation and practical steps. The internal discussions will generate this kind of innovation at the end of the day. Now we will move on. After this introduction, we will be moving on to the key theme and the key concept without which innovation cannot materialize. Now I'm talking about the cultural incubators. The word incubator itself is highly important, and the selection of this particular word is important. An incubator means love, the right temperature, the right work environment, and everything that is required to start the work properly, because any flaw in this environment may impede the process of materializing the entire process. That is why many of our organizations are inefficient, because the environment in which they exist are not sound enough and are not efficient, whether we're talking about the work environment or the procedures or the bureaucracy and red tape. So the cultural incubator can be summarized in a number of factors. The first of which is recruitment of the best human capital and the best workers, because there is work to be done, and therefore we have to set certain conditions and ensure that the workers who join the organization possess these skills and these capabilities. We also talk about the corporate culture. The corporate culture, here we are talking about the things that are closely related to the values that we have in the organization, the long-standing impact of this organization. If we have genuine support and full support one day, and on the other day we don't have sufficient support, having values means that the internal environment of the organization will be stable and will provide a stimulating environment. The thing that we're talking about is experimenting new ideas. We've been talking about innovation. Now we need to put these ideas to the test and try to implement them, and therefore be able to implement them and make them part of the reality. Moreover, we are talking about the dynamics, the team dynamics. We cannot work in an organization, especially in terms of innovation. Creativity may be an individual concept, but when we talk about even corporations, when they can utilize these individual creativity aspects, yet we need to work as a group to turn these innovative ideas also into a tangible reality. We should always remember that it is important to highlight the role of the team leading this process because through its efforts we achieve the desired objective. As for the following point, we are talking about the organizational ideas. These organizational ideas will enable us to organize all the factors that we have talked about. The organization that we mean is how to organize work within the organization to convey ideas or to generate ideas and test them and put them into models and modes of production. What should we start with? We are talking about a number of decisions. If we say that a specific entity has a mission and a vision and values, we should shift towards achieving this vision, and there has to be, from the organizational perspective, there have to be a number of decisions. The highest group at the organization level will be making the decisions, and it is highly important in terms of its formation or diversification through being comprised of a number of different specializations, and its joint work and almost from all the different aspects. And this is a highly important aspect for this group. The second point that we need to work on is to distribute or divide the organization into sectors. These sectors, if we're talking about the Ministry of Education, we have curricula, we have activities, we have teachers. If you're talking about the country, we have the education sector, the healthcare sector, and other sectors. So we don't need to. We need to look at each sector as part of a larger organization and a larger process. This subsidiary project or subsidiary sector also has a number of decisions, and these number of decisions in the subsidiary system, along with the other systems, can write down or make the decisions or declare the higher decisions and decrees through an information system, a sound information system. And through this subsidiary sector, we also talk about an information system and an observation system, an observation center, and the direction of work. This is available at the individual and the overall systems. There is a network connecting these subsidiary systems to the main one. And these subsidiary projects are all supported at the organizational level by a specialized group of highly skilled workers. They are the workers of innovation or knowledge workers. They are the ones who possess the professional innovation capabilities that underscore the work of all other systems and sectors. This network that you can see can pass information upwards and downwards and at the horizontal level. And the more this network is strong and flexible, the more the communication will be more efficient, the decisions will be made easily and swiftly, and the work will be shifting towards achieving the desired objectives quickly. Now, if you'd like to talk about, let's say that all what I've mentioned is done properly? What are the requirements of creativity and innovation and implementing creativity and innovation? Now, we may have a more accurate overview because we pointed out that creativity is an individual phenomena, but the creative people who will be leading the change, and the innovators should also have the ability to select from among those who have a high level of intelligence or special capacities, and also have their own resume and track record of implementing such ideas. The people who are known for having capacities and special abilities that surpass the average. Then we need to capitalize on their skills to put them at the forefront and ensure they are responsible for this work. Moreover, there is the leadership that also has an approach based that has an approach full of bravery and accepting risk. Those who are willing to take risks and are not willing to accept failure are always successful. If you don't have a major objective, there will be an issue, because what you will produce will never be larger than your own capabilities, and you will never achieve your objective. So you need to have high objectives to be able to achieve them. The second point is enjoyment. You need to be in a position where you enjoy your work and where the workers enjoy their work and underscore each other's efforts to achieve the desired results. Every kind of work and every domain has its own pioneering leaders, and those pioneers will enable you to avoid starting from scratch. So you need to look into the work the factors you're working on, study from the great figures in this field in order to be able to surpass their own work. Try to pinpoint the aspects which set you apart from the rest, and then underscore them to be highly utilized, highly useful for boosting your success, and simplify your work to ensure that you have the ability to maximize your benefit from it, because in many cases people reject the things they cannot understand. As for the paper, it has selected from the international trends a specific number of them. We have a new system of innovation that may be most appropriate to our Arab culture, and this means a lot to us, because we have many hindrances and any obstacles, and we need to do our very best to overcome the tough challenges, in the sense that we try to overcome these obstacles and make it a smooth way toward the desired transition. That is why I always say that the most difficult part in building change capacities, we have done our best to achieve and bring about change, but we also need to focus on culture and the organizational aspects to ensure that we overcome these obstacles.
I hope that we have reached to or have conveyed the idea that I wanted to, and the last thing that I'm sure that we will come to a conclusion through discussions and questions. Thank you very much, and peace be upon you. Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud. Now, the second paper in this session is the Education and Innovation Policies and Strategies by Dr. Stephen Vincent, and he's in charge of the Research Center and Deputy Director of the CED, who is in charge of the innovation and training. And he is also in charge of the measuring the achievement in innovation in education. His work focused on the skills of education and innovation in the knowledge society and developing of the societies in terms of education. He is the author of two books, the innovation in the education, especially with the math and the statistics, and the role of the education skills in knowledge. Dr. Stephen, the floor is yours. That means
what I would like to discuss is very much in line with the previous presentation and what has been said this morning already. So it's really talking about we're working on two different things. One is basically what is the kind of education and skills that are needed in, for the future in innovative societies. And so for that, we've tried to look at what are the skills for innovation in the economy and try to derive from that what kind of education is needed for that. So that's one of the big things that we're talking. So, all the discussion we had this morning about, the new jobs, the robotics, etc., is very much aligned with that kind of work. But today I'm going to focus more on another part of our work, which is on innovation in the education sector. And so basically work on the different drivers of innovation in education by using basically the same approach that most other people would use in other sectors of the economy. So it's looking very much at, whether the traditional drivers of innovation policy are actually activated in the education sector and whether they can actually really help us to make innovation more innovative. So basically, there are four main drivers of innovation in general. It's science. It's how we have all these new ideas and how they can change things. So we see it a lot in medicine, for example, and it's a way how our health has been improved. It's innovation which is also stimulated by the business sector. It's how, for example, if we take again the health sector, how you have all these new machines, the medical imagery, for example, or all these drugs which are developed by the private sector that we can then use to improve the practices in one specific domain. The stimulation also of innovation by the practitioners. So I continue with the metaphor of the health sector. It's how the nurses and the doctors change their practice and bring some new things to actually improve the quality of our health system. So sometimes by doing very simple things like washing their hands, between two patients. And that is one of the tremendous change that has been brought to the health sector. And finally, actually, it's also looking at the users. So, the patients in the case of the health sector and how they contribute themselves to innovation and changing the practices. And that is something that can also happen in the case of the education sector. So basically, we have, in the case of, if we apply this model to innovation, and that's what really I'm going to do in the next minutes, we have two big chunks. It's how science-driven and business-driven innovation can be brought together. So by the new knowledge generation, for example, how to bring all the new findings of neuroscience to the education sector, all the new work on dyslexia, dyscalculia, and understand how actually things that we thought were related to the children, there are some new ways of, for example, teaching, of intervening to improve the quality of innovation, is how we can mobilize the business sector to design new tools for education. So how you actually can bring in some new tools and devices. So in the previous session, we've talked a lot about, all these 3D printing, all these new types of technology that could actually be used in other sectors. So why not do the same in the case of education and bring in all these things that will actually improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the education sector? And it's also about the evaluation of new and old practices, and so that's very much the role of research, of some evaluation agencies. But we also have a lot of things to learn, and a lot of innovation should come from the practitioners and the users themselves. So we have a lot of innovators or entrepreneurs who are school builders, to try to change new models of schools. And one question is whether they have enough room for that. You have a lot of new project developers coming up with new ideas, new ways to try to solve some problems. For example, access of poor students to better quality education. It's how you bring in, you put in some new processes to bring in some new tools for these children. You have all these new models which were also discussed in the previous session, like open educational resources. So how do you make relatively inexpensive tools accessible, and how you build on a community of practitioners, because many of these educational resources which are developed freely are in fact developed by teachers or, in many cases themselves, sometimes students or more. And finally, we have the question of how to, the implementation. And so here we very much relate to what has just been said. You have on the one hand the ideas, and then we need to implement them, and that's one of the biggest challenges. So, so one way, to think about it, and I think it's important because in general it's a lot of pillars which are disconnected or which are in the hands of different types of decision makers in education. So, for example, if we think of, the public investments in research, it's typically something that is actually in the hands of the Ministry of Science, and they will decide whether the budget for research will be allocated to nanotechnologies, or if it will be allocated to education or many other different things. Yes, so that's one of the things. Another very important thing which are in the hands of different types of stakeholders again, it's really the work organization of our educational establishments, so both schools on the one hand and higher education institutions. So one of the big things in the private sector is how to actually put in place work organizations that are conducive to innovation, that allow to absorb new knowledge, new practices, but also allow one to develop these new practices and knowledge and generate enough learning for the individuals and for the system. And so one of the big questions is really the extent to which in education we have these kind of learning organizations, and if we could set up this kind of organizational routines that will actually allow to generate more of this innovation. So a third pillar of, I would say, any innovation policy is actually the use of what the economists call the general purpose technology, and so it's the application of new technologies to a new sector. So in our case, these last decades, it has mainly been ICT, information and communication technology, and so how we can actually harness that. As has been mentioned before, ICT in itself is not enough to actually revolutionize education, and in fact, one of the mottos that we have at the OECD is to say that there are a lot of new things that can be done thanks to technology, new technologies, but at the end of the day, it's really the pedagogy that really matters and the way that these technologies are used. And we just had a recent report based on the PISA data that came out last week, I believe, or the week before, so very recently, and showing, in fact, with this paradoxical finding that in countries where they have the most equipment, that's that's where they have not so good results, in fact, so that you have also this kind of inverted curve. No technology at all, you don't have that good results, but too much use is not so good, and perhaps because it's not very clear yet how to use all these different things. But I would like to come back on another thing a bit later in the speech, it's how we actually can use big data. So I don't control the slides so that they're moving quicker than I speak. So the last important thing, which would be actually called the framework conditions, if we were talking of innovation in another sector, is how the environment that you create for innovation empowers different actors to innovate, give them enough room, enough freedom to do that, while keeping a certain level of quality, of course. So that's one of the big challenges in the case of education. Many countries have tried, for example, to use market mechanisms or quasi-markets, so how to give more freedom to different schools or establishments to, with the goal to actually make them more innovative. So that I would say that the charter schools in the United States are one of the big examples, the academies in the United Kingdom, and we have a few more of these cases. What has been shown so far is that these are powerful tools to disseminate things that we already know. So for example, in these countries, we have more, let's say, Montessori schools or bilingual schools or, sometimes back to the basics school, than in many other places. So that's the kind of models which are actually driven by these things. Also in terms of organization and of marketing, it has created really a new scene, but overall, they have not managed to create any radical innovation. So this, these models have not created new ways of schooling that we were talking this morning in the previous session about a new vision for schooling. It has not of instruments. If we think of curriculum policy and assessment, we have to think of them in going together, and we've done some work on that and how different countries do actually give some room to teachers, schools, either to design themselves their curriculum, or sometimes they give, for example, 20% of the curriculum, which is totally at the discretion of the schools. But interestingly, in many cases, it's very much related to a strong assessment policy, because basically, the assessment is one way to control what is going on. So you may have total freedom of the curriculum size, but in that case, you tend to have a relatively strong assessment to make sure that, in fact, there is some level of compliance. Or in some cases, you have a strong curriculum, with the idea that it's one of the best ways to disseminate new innovations and new practices, and possibly one that have been evaluated as positive, and in many cases a bit more relaxed approach on accountability and assessment. There are many other things which are very important for innovation. We've mentioned the funding aspect, for example, a lot of programs and how you actually create networks between innovators. And of course, there is all the work on professional development, and I would say of initial training, and so how actually from the beginning when teachers are trained, they have a mindset which is open to innovation and change and continuous improvement. And so that's something which is one of the difficult parts. How do we instill this kind of culture in a system that does not have it yet? And so that's one of the big paradoxes, and I will come back on that one. So we've looked, let's go to the next one as well. Next, yes, thank you. Final thing, and of course it will not surprise you, for someone working at the OECD, we put a lot of importance on actually measurement. And of course, what is in many cases missing in the case of innovation, and perhaps not so much in the business sector where this has been done for years, but it's making sure that in fact you measure innovation in the education sector to see whether you have a policy which is actually conducive to that. So we've published a book called Measuring Innovation in Education, which proposes new ways of assessing it. This one just uses, in fact, all data. which have been collected for other purposes, so it's not the best way, in our opinion, to do it, but it can be done nonetheless. And we believe, of course, that it's very important to monitor innovation. Sometimes we have false ideas about, for example, we believe that nothing is changing in innovation. This is not true. In fact, there are many things changing all the time, and sometimes changing a lot. Whether these are the right changes, that's open to discussion, of course, but it's not very clear that education is changing or innovates much less than the other sectors, and which would be surprising. You have a lot of tertiary educated people in innovation, but it's not very clear that we have, that all this innovation goes in the right direction. And if you look at what's happening internationally, it's quite interesting that there is no convergence in all the changes, so that, in one country, one practice, increases a lot in one decade. At the same time, in all the other countries, it decreases, exactly the same thing. So there is very little, some change, yes, but not a very strongly evaluated change. But here you can see that we could actually measure on, create an innovation composite index based on the changes in all the school practices that were declared based on the teacher questionnaires in the teams and peer surveys, so because all these questions were repeated, so we could actually see to what extent the teaching practices that were declared by all the teachers had changed over one decade. And you can see, in fact, that there is a lot of, there is some changes happening. What's interesting in that, for example, you can see that Indonesia is one of the countries where you have a lot of change, whereas Massachusetts, which is one of the most performant US states in education, has very little change. It's interesting to keep in mind that innovation is not an objective in itself. You want to innovate to achieve some goal, not just for the sake of changing. And of course, in Indonesia, perhaps because they don't have such a good performance compared to Massachusetts, they had to change many more things than it was the case in the US. But what's interesting is that it shows that they've really tried to do something in the past decade. So we know that it is the case if we look at the policies that have changed. But what is interesting is that you can see that these reforms are actually leading to some real change, and change of the practices in the classroom, which is also why we believe it's so important to measure innovation and to measure changes. Even if you're just trying to reform the system, in many cases you may change the law, you may change institutions, etc. But you're not always so sure that what's going on within the school or within the higher education institutions are also changing in the direction that was expected. So we have many breaks also to innovation, and we've started to discuss them this morning. So in my view, they can be very much related to what I've just shown, so that was the frameworks. But one of it is that we're talking about an ecosystem, so that we have a lot of different levels which are, which need to be aligned, which communicate with each other. So if you think of, we have individuals within organizations, they are, taken within a sector, we're, part of society, and also on international level. So it may well be the case that the individual, wants to innovate or tries to innovate, but the school or the organization level, it doesn't work. Or on the contrary, the organization changes the routines, but in fact, some of the individuals are not so keen, and so they don't change that much. And so you always have all these difficulties of trying to align not only, I would say, the element that I've mentioned before, but also, think of how you have all these connections that go together. And ultimately, I would say that a good innovation policy is really when you manage to create good learning and good knowledge flows at all these different levels, so all these arrows that are here, and you manage to create some level of alignment of knowledge flow for that. But I would say that currently one of the first breaks to innovation in the education sector is basically a lack of supply of innovation. in many cases, you have insufficient investment in public investment in educational research, and also of private investment in the education sector. Perhaps there are not sufficient incentives for entrepreneurial efforts in education, and not enough room which is left to the experimentation of practitioners, in all the different schools. So in the case of research, we know it very well. You think of the OECD, so here the data are relatively old, but they don't change very quickly, so that they would be more or less the same today. In an OECD country, the expenditure on education is about 5-6% of GDP, as compared to 8% in the case of health, if we can get back to the previous one. So, there is a bit more expenditure on health, but it's not dramatically more than in education. And now if you look at the investment in educational research, the public investment, you have 1% of the public research expenditure which is spent on education, against 8% or in the case of the health sector, and in some cases, like in the United States, it's a factor of 16, so there is really a very big difference. So it's partly due to the nature of research in these different areas, but perhaps, there is not enough which is done at this current stage. If we think now in terms of, the role of the industry, well, we have different ways, not always very good ones, but we have different ways of identifying the level of innovation as well for them. It seems that in the past decade there have been a change, and that there is a kind of emerging innovative industry which is appearing. So here we measure it through the patents in education, and we can see that in the number of patents that have been filed, we have seen an increase, from 100 to 400, so a fourfold increase between 96 and 2010. But which is generally related to the increase in ICT-related products. But you can see that, in fact, when you look at it as a share of all the patents that have been filed, so here it's stable, and it remains at 0.2% of all these patents, and it's a very low number. What's changing is where this is happening. So you can see that, in fact, the United States was really where most of it was happening in 96. They had almost half of all the patents in education, and now their share has decreased to 23%, so just 1/4, at the same level as the European Union. And you can see that many of the other players are actually increasing, and with the non-very large patent filers have been increasing 3 to 5%, and perhaps that's where the United Arab Emirates are, in this category. Most of all these patents are not actually done for the formal education sector. You can see that it's mainly for, corporate training, leisure, the tertiary education sector to some extent, and not so much for the K-12 education sector, the schooling sector, and perhaps because, in fact, the market in this sector is much more difficult, perhaps because and that's one of the questions for you who are planners, it is perhaps because it's mainly a public market, and that it's a more difficult market to reach out for some of these tool builders who are trying to develop products for the education sector. So another one is actually the demand for innovation. So there are also some breaks, and I think that first, it has been mentioned just before, the accountability policies lead to some level of risk aversion. Now that we have to be accountable for all the expenditures, all the public expenditures, it's much more difficult to take risk and to, and of course, so that's one of the big difficulties. I think there is a lack of also, of private funding for innovation in the education sector, perhaps because, it's not always seen as a profitable market enough. And there are also some difficulties with, the schools and teachers, as I have already mentioned, in some cases, and also in the parental demand for innovation. So I think that's a very interesting point. So if we look at So next slide, please. If we look at what we know from the parental demand, most parents are very happy with the school system, or, you know. So here they were asked, are you happy with the pedagogy and content of schooling? And you can see that in most countries that took the test, everyone is happy, and the ones who are unhappy are between 1% and 3%. Now, if you look what, you know, by socio-economic background, so next slide, please, you can see that more or less, again, you know, all the people from all the different socio-economic backgrounds are more or less equally happy, and that there are also very few who are unhappy. Now, if you think, are you happy with the school of your children or of your child? We have exactly the same picture. People are very happy, you know, so it's over 90%, and the ones who are unhappy are just at about 1%. And again, if we look at it from a socioeconomic perspective, it's exactly the same. So that's one of the big difficulties, you know, it's how do we get the pressure also to change if all the parents are happy. And of course, one of the big difficulties is that parents typically will be happy with the school because, you know, if I were unhappy with the school of my children, I would feel really like a bad parent, you know, that's, you know, where you want to send your children to schools that you find are okay. So interestingly, in fact, each time we see this kind of surveys done, the parents are happy about the school of their children, but they are sometimes unhappy with the education system as a whole, you know. So they don't find the system is so good, but at least what their students get is more or less fine. And of course, we have the same thing with the teachers. We don't have this kind of data for them, but you know, sometimes there is the inability and willingness to adopt some of these new, you know, pedagogies or these changes, because in fact, the way that they teach is very much fine to them. They have the feeling that it works enough, and so that's one of the difficulties. So the last one is knowledge management, you know, so the third break. How do we actually make the knowledge flow within the sector? So I've already mentioned the question of the learning organizations and the organizational learning within school and across the education sector. One of the big problems sometimes is actually the way that we think about professional development. We tend to think of professional development as sending teachers to a school, you know, or to training, you know, so you will get out of it, and then a teacher will teach you something new. In many cases, and that's all the idea of these learning organizations, you know, there are a lot of ways to actually learn things while you are working, you know, so you don't even have to leave your school, you know, you can have some practices where there is a lot of sharing between the teachers in the school. You have sometimes routines, sometimes it's just having a coffee break, you know, which is institutionalized, where you can share what's going on within the school. Or, you know, you have these, for example, these listening studies in Japan and in some of the Eastern countries where actually you observe and you show your teaching to some other teachers so that in fact they can learn from what you're doing, and you can discuss and improve it as it goes. A third question is that, you know, when to be fair on the educational research part is that sorry, there is a real difficulty in producing good evidence in education, you know, so it's more difficult than showing that a drug has an impact on killing some bacteria because education is so much intertwined with so many other factors. So that's one of the big difficulties, how to isolate some new practices and see to what extent it is this new practice that works as opposed to so many other things that we have. And I would say, and I will get to that now, there is also an insufficient use of the data that are collected in the sector. So in fact, education is one of the sectors where you have the most data collected, you know, so we know if the students are absent, present, you know, we know the grade that they've had, we know a lot of things about them, but if we think about it, we don't do much out of it. And so one of the new promises, and which has been mentioned, so we were talking, we do not only need to prepare the students for the big data, you know, that are happening outside of the sector, but we need to actually use the power of big data to improve the education sector. And I think that's typically what's happening with this, the design of new information systems for education. And actually, I believe that the UAE has a very good one in that respect. And it's how we can actually drive innovation thanks to this use of data, by sharing it, commenting them, but also by giving quick feedback to all the different stakeholders, the teachers, the students, the administrators, on what is going on without waiting forever, and how all this administrative data that we have can actually be processed thanks to all the new computing power that we have. So really how, instead of just using the data to produce statistics so that we can actually sometimes do good benchmarks between different countries, which I like in principle, how can we actually manage to make all this data actionable and turn them into data that help to make decisions? And so how can we transform our information system into kind of expert systems, again, as we would call them in the case of the education sector? So this is something which is happening in some places. So here I'm showing you some examples of the information system in Colorado, which has a lot of different bank of resources, which actually manages to show how the students grow over time. So you have a report on how the students are changing, over time in all different domains. And also you have this predictive model, so all this learning analytics that allow you as a teacher to see where the student is expected to be in the current year, so that in fact it gives you some idea of, do I do enough? Is my student where I would expect him or her to be in these different disciplines? And one of the very powerful things of that is that it really allows you to compare a lot of different types of students. For example, one of the very nice things that I've seen with this system is how it changes sometimes the culture. You, for example, as a teacher, you may feel that, given the socio-economic background of my students, that's really the best they can do, and I'm very happy with what they're doing. Thanks to this kind of tool, you can actually compare in real time your students to other students of similar economic background and see if by chance some other people are not doing better, and then you can actually connect with them and see, what are they doing, what's happening in these different places, and, are they doing things in a different way? Are there some innovations that actually are being implemented there? And could we learn from them so that, in fact, they can help some other people? So that's more or less the end of my speech. And so some of the conclusions is, again, among the breaks, one, the supply of innovation, the demand for innovation, and that's very important, all these things around knowledge management. So to give you one example, we're currently working on a new project which is related to that, and which is around the development and assessment of creativity and critical thinking in school. So it's the students' creativity that we're trying to actually improve. And what we noted is that, there was very little research on that, which related to creativity in the school, so we had to start from almost scratch. There was virtually no existing tool or test that we could use for that, or that teachers could use if they wanted to do some work. There is no disagreement. That's one of the 21st century skills, so people would not tell you, I don't want to see that, most of the people would agree. But it's not implemented because people do not necessarily know how to do it. What does it look like to be creative for a 9-year-old when you teach mathematics, or when you teach arts, or when you teach something else? And if you look at the curricula and the way that they were expressed in many cases, if you look at the assessments, there is no space and no room for all these skills or abilities to actually be demonstrated. And so, that's one of the limitations of, the system tools in that particular case, even when there is a will actually to change these different things. And at the same time, So we're working with a lot of different countries, and there are a lot of very interesting initiatives. You always, in all the countries, they can find, oh yes, but this school, they do all these things which are great. There is a network of schools that do all these different things. The big problem is that it doesn't go beyond these schools, you know. So you have all this good practice, but that stays where it is in many cases, and we don't have enough networks of these schools or of these people to actually allow innovation to become more systemic and to flow in all the system. So if we really want to have innovation education, I think that it's time to have a more systematic and more explicit strategies for that. One of the reasons is that it's all spread between different stakeholders, you know, so typically the research I've mentioned already is in the hands of the Minister of Science. The part of the development will be in the hands of the Ministry of the Economy. The one on school organization, well, it's left generally to the heads of the school. The system organizations is in your hands in many cases, you know, and the measurement is also related to the statistics or the researchers in many cases. But what we have to think, and that will be my final word on that, you know, and especially for you who are education planners, one source of innovation is reform. So, you know, you may want to decide that from now on, this is how you're going to do things, you know. So I do a reform, and then I create change, and I do an innovation. But another way to think about it is through an innovation policy. So I create the ecosystem. So you still have to do something. You have to see, oh, I have to invest, you know, in the development of new research. I have to think of the schools. I have to give some room for some new people to develop tools, or leave the schools actually have some money to buy some of these tools which may be of interest to them, let them experiment to some extent. So create an ecosystem where you don't decide initially what is a good thing to do, but where you empower the people to actually learn and develop some things of their own. That, of course, you need to evaluate, because you don't want anything to be done, but, you know, but leave room. And that's typically what's an innovation policy. So in some cases, it may not result in as much innovation as a reform, you know, because reform, you tell people what to do, and you can change things very quickly, perhaps, if it works, you know, but it doesn't work in all cases. That's the same with innovation policy. It doesn't work in all cases, but if you don't think about it, it's very unlikely to happen. So thank you very much. And you, on the final one, you have, you know, if you go to our website, you will find a lot of different reports. You know, I've spoken long, but you can read much more, and there is much more resources that you can find on our report. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Stefan. نفتح الآن المجال للأسئلة.
Now we'll open up the floor to questions from the hall. Please. I'm Khalid Greishi from the Ministry of Education in Saudi Arabia. At the beginning, I would like to point out that what has been discussed in this session is of paramount importance. So I would like to thank the speakers for what they have introduced. Moreover, I would like to thank the moderator for the point in which he shed light on the national strategy of the UAE, which is a very passionate strategy and a very visionary one. We wish we hope to know more details, even if it is printed out or in electronic format, so we will be able to know about the dimensions that have been shaped upon this strategy. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Saudi government adopted through the King Abdulaziz Knowledge and Sciences City, adopted the National Innovation Strategy for Innovation and Creativity, and it has taken major strides in this direction. It is very much similar to the equivalent strategy in the UAE. I believe there is ample opportunity to exchange expertise in this domain to achieve mutual benefits in Saudi Arabia, the national strategy included all the aspects of education in the entire country, including integration between the service sector and the research sector, and independent budgets have been designated for this purpose, in addition to contracts that have been signed with international entities, and starting with regional education and the entities that have to do with boosting innovation and creativity. In this context, I have a question that can be answered by any of the respected presenters and speakers. All of us know that there are many signs of innovation and creativity, especially for that children have at their tender age. They have this passion for discovering new things, and this is a very important stage of innovation. Also, the phenomena of posing many questions, and then soon this child, one day after another, he becomes more like a machine, using the available resources, and stops being innovative and loses his creative ability. What leads to this result from your perspective, and how can we avoid this unfortunate development in the education, in the education system, especially at primary education and the subsequent stages of education? The point that was highlighted also, and the experience that was highlighted by the, let's say, the major practices and benchmarks that have been highlighted, also spurred our interest in knowing more about these results. Are there a number of factors or joint factors among the countries that have high rates of innovation and creativity? Do they have something in common in terms of education, or maybe at the level of the rules and regulations or legislative level? What can we learn from them? What are the lessons learned from these developed countries, and can they be replicated in other countries that have not reached this level of development in creativity and innovation? Thank you for listening to me. Thank you. The first question, please. Who would like to answer? Please. Teachers always like to keep standing. They don't like to sit down. I can link both questions, actually, the question that you posed. I don't want to talk about a specific country and say that it is better than others in terms of this innovative product or creative product. But definitely there are some developed countries and some other countries that are at different levels of development and maturity, and the same principle applies to schools, establishments, and to individuals. This is a fact. But what I would like to shed more light on is how to place what we have in mind on the agenda and make it a tangible reality, starting from classrooms. And how can we develop the skills of children and even the grown-ups who have many questions and have scientific curiosity, in order to nurture their discovering skills. I don't want to repeat what has been said about teachers and schools and the traditional schools that have had the credit of putting out this curiosity that the children used to have. Actually, teachers should be the ones who encourage children not to be afraid and to pose questions and to liberate them from fear. There is no room other than the classroom where we can start. The more we talk about creativity and innovation at country level, the beginning is always at classrooms and at tender age. How can we develop this dimension and upgrade the infrastructure of innovation? As long as we have intellectual subjugation or intellectual siege in terms of limiting what children can say and express, we will never be able to upgrade and develop this progress or nurture progress in this direction. But intelligent teachers or the teaching staff, if they from the beginning manage to build up the child's capacity and provide the environment in which children can speak freely and fearlessly, in this case we will be taking the first step. And if we talked about designing ideas, we said that a leader can nurture in the organization and boost in this organization this experimental mentality that has to do with producing ideas. This is the starting point, whether we are talking about classrooms or at corporate level or at the base level. So this is the beginning. Thank you. Dr. Stefan, maybe you would like to add something or answer the second part of the question?
Start with the second one on the drivers of innovation in the different countries. Well, the work that we've done so far did not really allow us to go in much depth on what are these drivers in all the different countries that we could cover. The strongest result that we found was that there was a strong correlation between innovation intensity and teacher satisfaction. Of course, we don't know whether satisfied teachers are more prone to innovate or if because they innovate and they become more satisfied. But there was, that was the strongest relationship that we found. We've looked at some of the other ones, but I shall say that at this stage, we don't have good enough data, I would say, to really answer the question. But the work was meant really as a starting point to start discussing precisely these types of questions. And on the first one, in fact, the project that I've mentioned towards the end is exactly asking this question. So you have, I would say, two possible ways to answer the question. One would be to say that, well, as the children get older, they become more mature, they become more socialized, and so this is also one of the roles of schooling, to make them behave like future adults, etc. And so, we start no longer seeing these things. Another one, and which probably is to say that in fact it's the schooling process that leads to this kind of behavior, and partly because we don't really try to develop these skills. So we, as I've mentioned, no one is against them, but there is no real room in schooling to actually see this creativity being developed. So for example, then we have a high-stake exam types of tests which do not require any creativity. And so one of the things that we're trying to do to foster it is to develop a set of pedagogical resources for teachers. So we're going to work with a rubric, trying to explain what it looks like to be creative, what are the big dimensions of them, to develop a few pedagogical activities as well, to show to teachers, how they could actually continue to teach what they teach, mathematics, science. In our case, we also do music and visual arts, but in such a way that it gives the students some room to also express, their imagination, their inquisitive dimension, and to do things at the same time, and also to collect a few examples of assessments, because we want them to identify what are the different levels of progression in these different skills. So I don't have the answer yet, but I hope that in 2 years' time, once we will have actually finished this first phase of the project, I will have a better one for you.
Thank you. Dr. Vincent.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks both of our colleagues, the presenters. My question is to Vince. You referred to OECD PISA study and innovation index. Is there a correlation between innovation index at system level or school level and PISA results itself, outside of the contextual factors like teachers or whatever? This is one thing. Because if we look to the innovation index you have presented at national levels and system level, whether it's school level or tertiary levels, it's clear that United States is leading, while their students' results in PISA is just around the median score. Don't you think that these international assessments, especially PISA, have ruined education systems around the world? And don't you think that it kills innovations in innovation systems? And it's, directed schools and systems around the world to adopt quick fixes to education systems and also to policy borrowing, which in fact has made a damage to education system around the world. Thank you.
Well, I don't think that PISA has ruined education systems around the world. Actually, I think that it has brought a lot of new, interesting information that has actually given some new sources of information to countries that can now benchmark themselves and also see whether they're making progress over time based on these measures. PISA is one test. It doesn't measure everything, and so of course, it's also why we continue to do a lot of development work around it and on the side, like this new project I was talking about. So typically, for example, the creativity or the critical thinking that we're looking at in this new project is not yet part of the PISA framework. It might become in the future once we have made some progress. But so so there is no claim that it measures everything. Now, in what we found in our work on the measurement of innovation and the relationship with PISA and actually teams and other achievement test scores at the national level, is that there was no correlation, or at least no strong correlation, so it was very weak. And in a sense, it's not so surprising. So perhaps it is because we still don't have good enough data, as I've said before, that we are just at the beginning of the measurement of innovation, and we just have correlational data which are not very, very strong. But another thing is to think that innovation is basically a significant change, something new or significantly improved, new processes, new products. And in some cases, so you could think that, the innovation, well, if you don't have a good score, your need to innovate is much higher than in some places, and so you may much more have the urge to innovate. And so you may have higher innovation scores, even so you have not so good achievement scores, so if you think of the correlation. And the reverse may be true, so you may be complacent, for example. You think, like I'm doing well enough on PISA, so why do I need to change anything? So it's not very clear that there is even theoretically that there is a strong link between the urge. It's exactly the same for a business, So if you think of a company, in some cases, one company that is close to bankruptcy, they will have to innovate a lot, because if they don't really innovate at this stage, they will go bankrupt and they will be dead. Another one, which is going relatively well, may actually be not that innovative, because the urge of doing that is not the same. So my point is that the correlations between your achievement and your innovation level, intensity, are not necessarily related. And that's normal. But obviously, innovation is a change for the good. In principle, people try to improve something, and so in that respect, you would expect indeed that where there is innovation, you have improvement. And in the cases where I've shown, like Indonesia, that I have already mentioned, there was improvement actually. It doesn't make it a great system by PISA standards, you know, but they have actually progressed over the past decade in that area.
Thank you. More questions? There.
دكتورة خديجة عبد القادر تركستاني من وزارة التعليم.
I'm from Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I'm Dr. Turkestani. For the first paper, Dr. Stephen said that in building the innovation and the skills, we have to focus on innovation through different stages, and the decision-making process, how we take decision in that regard. Some people are refusing what they don't understand. Should we focus on building the innovation, the capacity of innovation? In addition, we notice sometimes that children have some skills, they are clever in producing more innovation. When they reach certain stage of education, when we don't develop this kind of skills of innovation, if we are talking about elementary schools, or elementary stage, if no one taking care of their innovations, how we can develop their, is it possible that innovation will, when he move to another level, can we build his capacity of innovation? When inside school, sometimes we don't follow up, and we don't have skills, educational skills, in order to bring this innovation into reality. But in higher education, they are taken care by somebody else. Do you think that we can cope with the difference between the two stages, and can we bridge the gap between what happened in the beginning and what happened lately? When the problem of
those experience and practical of innovation. We have innovations, but we can't gathering them. So do you think that gathering talent students in one class is better, or it's better to leave them in different classes? I mean, special class for talent students in each school is better, or living in different between among their friends, it's better. That means we have special teachers for taking care of these students. Is it better for specializing for them? Okay, thank you.
If there is a gap, what can we do? Would this will affect the innovation of the guy? This is very intelligent question, I must say. I am saying that if we are talking about the more the child is young, and the more we are care about his innovation and his thinking, that will be better, of course. But what is more important than all of this, that the continuity, we should assure the continuity of taking care of in all the stages of education. But can we start at a higher stage? So if we don't have the chance to develop their innovation skills at the younger stage, can we go do that in the secondary school? It could be good. We might be good to do that. But for sure that if we started that, the earlier we start, the better we are, especially at the younger age. So if there is a gap in between the different stages, would this will affect, from my point of view, the continuity is very important. This gap, this discontinuity, but for sure we have to make sure that we can take care of developing their skills at any stage, at any point. These skills, the birth of these skills will not die if was interrupted, if the care was interrupted. But if we continue, sure that we are continuing in supporting our children. I believe that our schools are prepared for taking care and supporting innovation. The teacher has very important role to play and support the skills and the innovation, but the more important that we open the stage for experiencing this kind of innovation. The reproduction of an innovation might not lead us to innovation, good innovation in job market, but in the secondary school it is very important. Of course we have to do that throughout the stages of education, but the last stage in the university also, innovation are very important because they come up with something that good for the market.
Whether it's better to collect all the talents in one classroom rather than leaving them distributed in different classrooms.
So it's very true that creativity and innovation in many cases are related to the academic level of the students, and that you cannot always expect the same things. So my personal inclination on that one would be to keep mixed groups, that you, or at least there is no reason to actually have a consistent same ability grouping, because there is a lot to learn from, these different levels. On the first question as well, I think that, it's never too late, so that it's true that then at the university level you can still continue and try to, to learn what you haven't necessarily learned before. And increasingly, there are all these university programs trying to actually foster innovation programs, design thinking, entrepreneurship programs, etc. But nonetheless, I would say that it's always possible to improve a little bit, the ability of the children to innovate, to be more creative or more of critical thinkers, whatever the level of proficiency. So you may not make them become Einsteins, but you may actually, you can improve them a little bit, and that's really what can be achieved in the education sector. So for example, do they have enough room to explore new things, to make different types of connections while they are studying? Do they have the ability to have ideas? We know that originality, for example, is strongly correlated with the number of ideas that you're able to generate. Is it something which is part of the processes of the schooling? Is there enough room for them to be persistent and to do something, actually, to present some work and to do some work with their hands, have a project, etc. So I think that it's more this kind of question that teachers should ask themselves, and that we collectively should really ask ourselves if we really want to take seriously this agenda of innovation.
وبهذا نأتي إلى نهاية الجلسة الثانية من جلسات المؤتمر. أحب في نهاية هذه الجلسة نشكر مقدمي الأوراق دكتور محمود أحمد المساد ودكتور ستيفان فينست. شكرا جزيلا.